channel to update the latest information. We are QTN.
An explosive device derailed a Russian freight train in a region bordering Ukraine for a second straight day Tuesday ahead of an expected counteroffensive by Kyiv. Russian territory and Crimea, annexed by Moscow in 2014, have been hit in recent days by a series of attacks. The last 4 days have seen 2 trains derailed by explosions, a suspected drone hitting an oil depot in Crimea that caused a huge blaze, and power lines blown up near St. Petersburg. The strikes come as Russia gears up to celebrate May 9th, a holiday marking the Soviet victory over the Nazis that has become a central event during President Vladimir Putin's rule. Ukraine has followed its usual line of not claiming responsibility for the attacks, which came as Kyiv said it is finalizing preparations for a spring offensive announced weeks ago. Alexander Bogomaz, the governor of Russia's western Bryansk region, said Tuesday the train was derailed by an unidentified explosive device. He said it went off at Snezhetskaya station, outside the regional hub of Bryansk, a city of around 370,000 people near the Ukraine and Belarus borders. A locomotive and several wagons of the train derailed, he said, adding that there were no casualties. On Monday, a similar explosion caused a train to derail and catch fire near Oneka, in the same region but closer to the Ukraine border. Throughout its more than year-long offensive, the Kremlin has sought to portray Russia as safe while its troops fight in Ukraine. Earlier on Tuesday it acknowledged a security threat. Of course, we are aware that the Kyiv regime, which is behind a number of such attacks, terrorist attacks, plans to continue this line, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said. All our intelligence services are doing everything necessary to ensure security. Russian railways also put out a statement saying the train had derailed due to the intervention of unauthorized persons in the work of rail transport. It did not mention an explosive device. The state operator said the incident took place at 7:47 p.m. local time, 16:47 GMT, between Snezhetskaya and the nearby village of Belai Berega. It said the train's front locomotive and around 20 wagons were derailed and that rail traffic in that section had been suspended. There have been many reports of sabotage on railways in Russia since Moscow launched its Ukraine offensive, but this week is the first time officials confirmed attacks. More than 65 people, including a third of minors, have been detained since the fall in around 20 regions of the country alone on charges of railway sabotage, according to account by the independent media Mediazona published in mid-April. Ukraine says it has been preparing for months a counteroffensive aimed at repelling Russian forces from the territory they currently hold in the east and south. Denmark meanwhile said it was sending 1.7 billion kroner, $250 million, worth of military aid to Ukraine to support the forthcoming Ukrainian offensive. The package included mine-clearing vehicles, ammunition, and financial support for the procurement of air defense, the Danish Defense Ministry said in a statement. The equipment is essential to pave the way for Ukrainian tanks and mechanized infantry on the front line, Acting Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen said. Ukrainian engineers claim they have designed a People's missile that can be built in an average front garden with almost double the range of the US-supplied HIMARS rocket. The missile, which uses the same technology as the German V-1, is essentially a motor-powered steel tube attached to a pair of glider wings and fired from a catapult. The anti-Russian Vidsyk protest group behind the design, dubbed Trembeda in Ukrainian, says it can be produced cheaply from everyday materials. A graphic released explaining the technology shows up to 3 of the rockets fitting inside a one-car garage. By Vitsyk's own admission, a garage-made missile will not be able to strike with the same precision as laser-guided rocket systems. But in a swarm of 20 missiles, the new weapon will likely be able to overcome enemy air defenses and hit targets at a sufficient depth, the group claimed. Early videos of the weapon shared on social media appear to show its makers firing up a crude pulsating jet engine. The use of gasoline as fuel could thrust the rocket some 140 kilometers from launch, the engineers claimed, around double the range of the powerful HIMARS. Its warhead could contain a thermobaric charge or a combined 20 kilograms high explosive charge, capable of creating chaos amongst Russians near the target zone. The Trembeda would produce a thermal signal picked up by enemy air defense systems, which would then fire expensive munitions to take it down, according to the developers. Our simple missile is incomparably cheaper than the shots of enemy anti-aircraft missile systems, the developers said. The 100 decibel engine would have an emotional impact on Russian troops, too, they claimed. The V1, or Doodlebug, terrorized Londoners during the Second World War with its distinctive whine. Improvised weapons can be very effective and the Ukrainians are very canny and the Russians pretty inept, Hamish de Breton-Gordon, a former NATO commander, said. They can be a massive force multiplier, especially to save using sophisticated Western weaponry. Workshops across the war-torn country have already converted pickup trucks into Grad rocket launchers and developed remote-controlled explosive devices. After Russian forces were driven back from parts of eastern Ukraine by a Ukrainian counteroffensive last year, mines remained in many fields, making it perilous for farmers to sow grain for the next harvest. On Tuesday, Oleksandr Krivtsov, a farmer near the village of Kharkov, said he had devised a new way to remove the mines by kitting out his tractor with protective panels stripped from Russian tanks and operating it by remote control. The tractor can withstand blasts and uses armor from damaged Russian military vehicles to protect its body. Mr. Krivtsov bought a system that would enable one of his team to operate the tractor remotely from a digger's bucket suspended in the air nearby. We started doing this just because the crop sowing time has come and we can't do anything because the rescue services are very busy, Mr. Krivtsov, a general manager at his agricultural company, said. We ran over an anti-tank mine. The protection got blown out, but the tractor is safe, he said. Everyone's alive and safe. The equipment was restored and repaired. Inspired by the Iranian-made suicide drones used by Moscow, Ukrainian engineers are also developing ground-based weapons to destroy armored vehicles. The ground attack drones, which resemble a large remote-controlled car, can be used to place an 8-kilogram mine under an enemy vehicle, triggering an explosion beneath its wheelbase. The main idea is that this radel is used as a mobile warhead carrying 2 TM-62 anti-tank mines, which is intended to be activated under a car or tank, an analyst said, according to a Ukrainian military website. Ukraine's interior minister has said that 8 storm brigades, comprising of up to 40,000 troops, are being re-equipped as Ukraine prepares to launch a counteroffensive against Moscow's invasion. The brigades are fully formed, but Igor Klemenko said that they require 2 to 3 weeks of instruction before they are tasked with appropriate offensive assault operations alongside the Ukrainian army. Mr. Klemenko said that Kyiv was also planning the formation of additional units in parallel with this training, during an interview with Interfax Ukraine. At the same time, Russia's defense minister has ordered the production of missiles in the country to be doubled as soon as possible and its weapons supply rapidly increased. Western and Ukrainian officials have been suggesting for months that shortages of artillery munitions and missiles are undermining Russia's war, which is now more than 14 months old. The actions of Russian units conducting the special operation largely depend on the timely replenishment of stocks of weapons, military equipment and means of destruction, Sergei Shoigu said in remarks published by the Defense Ministry and broadcast on state television. He added that Russia's defense enterprises had been told to increase the pace and volume of production. In particular, Mr. Shoigu said the output of high-precision missiles needed to be doubled as soon as possible. It comes as Ukraine's military vowed not to give up on the eastern city of Bakhmut, the scene of some of the bloodiest fighting in the last few months. The battle for Bakhmut has symbolic importance for both sides, with Ukraine still holding on to some parts of the city after months of fierce fighting against regular Russian troops and fighters from the private Wagner mercenary force. Russia sees the city as a stepping stone to other areas of the region of Donetsk that it seeks to control. However, the front lines have barely moved in weeks. In remarks released after a visit to troops fighting in Bakhmut, General Alexander Syrsky, commander of Ukrainian ground forces said, "Together with the commanders, we have made a number of necessary decisions aimed at ensuring the effective defense and inflicting maximum losses on the enemy." He told soldiers in video footage of his visit, "We will continue, despite all the forecasts and advice, to hold Bakhmut, destroying Wagner and other most combat-capable units of the Russian army. We give our reserves an opportunity to prepare and we are preparing for further actions ourselves." Mr. Syrsky said on Monday that Ukrainian units had ousted Russian forces from some positions in Bakhmut. The Wagner Group said its units had made incremental advances there. Reuters was unable to verify the battlefield situation. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the founder of the Wagner Group, said on the same day that his troops were being supplied with only a third of the artillery shells they needed for their assault on the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. Mr. Prigozhin has for months railed against a lack of ammunition supplies from Moscow, saying poor support is holding back Russia's offensive. On Monday, the US estimated that more than 20,000 Russians had been killed in the last 5 months of fighting, with another 80,000 injured. White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said the estimates were based on US intelligence and said that half of those killed were from the Wagner Group, mostly around Bakhmut. The Kremlin dismissed the estimate on Tuesday, saying that been plucked from thin air and said that Washington had no way of obtaining the correct data. Elsewhere, Denmark has said it will donate military equipment and financial support to Ukraine worth 1.7 billion Danish crowns, £200 million, including mine clearance vehicles, munition, field bridges, and money for air defense that will be needed for a counteroffensive against Russian forces that are dug in behind hundreds of miles of trenches. We know that the Russians have entrenched themselves in the occupied territories of Ukraine with trenches, minefields and other obstacles to stop a Ukrainian offensive, the acting Danish defense minister, Troels Lund Poulsen, said. The material in the donation package is important to pave the way for Ukrainian tanks and the armored infantry in the front line, he added. The defense minister added that Denmark would reduce its military presence in Iraq starting in early 2024 and instead focus on the Baltic countries, offering NATO a battalion to defend the region. The battalion is expected to consist of between 700 and 1,200 soldiers, and is set to be deployed in Latvia between 4 and 6 months every year. The rest of the year, the troops will remain in Denmark, ready to be deployed to the Baltic states in case of a crisis, their Ministry of Defense said. Denmark will withdraw one of its security and escort units of about 105 soldiers in Iraq as of February next year, but will continue to provide staff and advice to NATO's mission in Iraq. May is traditionally a month for public celebration in Russia, with massive public processions on May 1st for Labor Day and military parades on May 9th for Victory Day, a holiday commemorating the Soviet victory over Nazi Germany. Not so in 2023. Russia's biggest trade union canceled its traditional Labor Day demonstrations because of the heightened risk of terrorist activity, while regions near the Ukrainian border called off Victory Day parades so as to not provoke the Ukrainian army. The Russian government has warned people across the country to stay away from military installations on Victory Day, while the hugely popular Immortal Regiment, an event during which ordinary citizens all over Russia march with portraits of relatives who died in the Second World War, has been moved online. Allegedly, the terrorist threat comes from Ukraine. Russian media reported on April 24 that a downed Ukrainian drone was found 30 kilometers (20 miles) from Moscow, but it seems difficult to accept that Russia's air defenses cannot guarantee the safety of Moscow's skies during the country's biggest patriotic celebration of the year, particularly at a time when Putin has been stoking Russian nationalist feelings to garner support for his war in Ukraine. A Ukrainian drone attack on Red Square during the Victory Day military parade would be humiliating for Putin, but it seems more likely that he's worried about the potential humiliation of thousands of civilians marching with the portraits of sons and husbands fallen in Ukraine. While official Russian figures have pointed to fewer than 6,000 military casualties in Ukraine, Ukraine claims approximately 150,000 Russian military personnel have been killed. Even conservative Western estimates hover around the 60,000 mark, more than triple the 15,000 Soviet troops killed in the 10-year Afghan war. Labor Day parades come with their own risk. In spite of the cancellation of official events, on May 1st a few small sporadic gatherings took place in cities all over Russia, to which some people turned up with anti-war banners. In St. Petersburg, a 76-year-old man was arrested for carrying a board with the traditional May Day slogan of "Peace, Work, May," with an added Z symbol with a red mark across it. In Ekaterinburg, a woman was reportedly detained with a banner inscribed with another traditional May Day slogan, "Peace to Peace." The banning of public events during the May holidays is less likely to be out of concern for citizens' safety, and more to do with Putin's paranoid obsession with shutting down any channel for criticism of his war, even if open support for Ukraine is tiny and the threat of a popular uprising very remote. At the same time that public protest is being preemptively suppressed, dissent and conflict continues to grow in military circles. In a 90-minute interview with a military blogger on April 29, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the de facto leader of the Wagner private military company, bemoaned the catastrophic state of the Russian army. "It has come when we have to stop lying to the population of the Russian Federation, saying that everything is okay." He sarcastically called the war in Ukraine the so-called special military operation, in a veiled criticism of Putin's ban on the use of the word war to describe events in Ukraine. Prigozhin also criticized the defense ministry for withholding ammunition and threatened to withdraw his men from the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, which Russia has been trying to take for 9 months. Conflicts are not only surfacing between Russia's private armies and the defense ministry, but among private armies themselves. On April 25, soldiers from Gazprom's private army, Potok, sent a video to Putin complaining that they had been transferred to a different private army, Redut, and then threatened by soldiers of the Wagner Group, who said they would shoot them if they retreated from their positions. In early April, mobilized soldiers from the regular army in the Luhansk region, in Russian-occupied Ukraine, disappeared, after telling relatives that they had been sold to the Wagner Group by their commander. When Prigozhin denounces the catastrophic state of the Russian army, he knows what he is talking about. Russian nationalist pro-war military bloggers also criticize Putin. The most well-known of these is Igor Girkin, aka Strelkov, who openly condemns Putin's lack of resolve to use Russia's full military might in Ukraine, and wages a simultaneous battle of words, for now, with Prigozhin. On April 2, when another notorious military blogger, Vladlen Tatarsky, was assassinated in a bomb attack in a St. Petersburg cafe formerly owned by Prigozhin, the Russian government blamed Ukrainian terrorists. Prigozhin stated that the attack was probably caused by infighting among what he calls Russian radicals. Putin has not reacted publicly to any of the military bloggers or private armies, all armed and violent men, who criticize the way the war is being fought. But walking around with a cardboard sign calling for peace can lead to temporary arrest, and being an anti-war intellectual carries the risk of a 25-year prison sentence. Russia is not on the verge of a popular revolution, but Putin still feels threatened enough by public anti-war protests to crack down at the first sign of peaceful civil dissent. This betrays a fundamental fear of showing any weakness that his armed critics could exploit. The main message here is clear: if you want to be safe in today's Russia, carry a gun. Better still, create a private army. This will increase your chances of survival the day the strongman falls. This will increase your chances of survival the day the strongman falls.